Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. It was a road that wasn't really a road, a shadow stretching through jungle and mountain, invisible to satellites, indestructible to bombs. The Americans called it the Ho Chi Minh Trail. To the Vietnamese, it was the lifeline of a revolution, the artery that carried men, weapons, and hope through the heart of Southeast Asia. And for more than a decade, it was one of the most secretive, strategic, and stubbornly resilient networks in modern warfare. This is the story of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the road that the U.S. could never stop. The History Brief today highlights a little-known anecdote from American history. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On February 1st, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln signed a joint resolution proposing the 13th Amendment, formally sending it to the states for ratification. On February 1st, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated during re-entry, killing all 7 people aboard. Story of the day. The story of the Ho Chi Minh Trail begins with the man it was named after. Born in 1890, Ho was a revolutionary, a nationalist, and the spiritual father of modern Vietnam. After decades in exile, he returned home to lead his people against colonial rule, declaring Vietnam's independence in 1945 after the Japanese defeat in World War II. But the French had other plans. They returned to reclaim their colony, sparking the First Indochina War, a brutal 8-year struggle that ended with France's defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The peace agreement that followed divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel, the Communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh, and the US-backed South under Dinh Diem. But Ho had no intention of keeping Vietnam divided. He vowed to reunify the country, and to do so, he needed a way to move men and materials from North Vietnam to the communist insurgents fighting in the south. And so, in the thick jungles of Laos and Cambodia, the North Vietnamese began building what would become one of the most ingenious supply networks in military history. The Ho Chi Minh Trail wasn't one single road. It was actually a labyrinth, a web of hidden paths that stretched over 9,000 miles through some of the harshest terrain on Earth. It began modestly in 1959, when the 559th Transportation Group, named for its founding date, May 1959, was created by the North Vietnamese Army. Their mission was simple but dangerous: build and maintain secret routes that would connect the Communist North with insurgent forces in South Vietnam. At first, supplies were carried by foot and bicycle. Soldiers known as porters pushed 300-pound loads along narrow jungle tracks. As the war escalated, so did the trail's sophistication. Wooden bridges, hidden depots, and camouflaged truck routes appeared, all protected beneath a dense jungle canopy. By the mid-1960s, the trail had become a logistical masterpiece, a living system constantly expanding, shifting, and repairing itself under fire. American pilots flew thousands of bombing runs over Laos and Cambodia trying to destroy it, but the trail always came back. The Ho Chi Minh Trail wound through some of the most difficult landscapes in Asia: Annamite Mountains, thick rainforests, and the monsoon-soaked jungles of Laos and Cambodia. The terrain was steep, wet, and brutal, but for the Vietnamese, it was also cover. The dense vegetation shielded the routes from aerial reconnaissance, and constant mist made it nearly impossible for American bombers to hit targets with precision. Villagers and local ethnic groups, often at gunpoint, sometimes out of sympathy, helped move supplies, dig bunkers, and repair damage. The North Vietnamese built thousands of miles of side roads and decoy paths, confusing U.S. pilots and forcing the Americans to waste ordnance on fake targets. In 1967, the network had grown into a massive multi-lane system with fuel pipelines, rest camps, hospitals, and even underground workshops hidden beneath the jungle floor. At its peak, it moved 60 tons of supplies per day. It wasn't just a road anymore. It was an organism, one that adapted to survive. The Americans understood the trail's importance. They knew that the war in South Vietnam could not be won if supplies and soldiers kept flowing in from the north. So they tried everything to cut it off. The CIA and the US Air Force launched a massive secret bombing campaign over Laos called Operation Barrel Roll, later expanded into Operation Steel Tiger and Operation Commando Hut. Between 1964 and 1973, the United States dropped more than 3 million tons of bombs on Laos alone, more than were dropped on Germany and Japan during World War II combined. They used napalm, cluster munitions, and sensors designed to detect movement. They even sprayed Agent Orange to strip away the jungle canopy and expose the roads below, but it didn't work. The North Vietnamese rebuilt faster than the bombs could fall. They worked by night, camouflaged by day. They repaired bridges within hours and moved trucks under cover of thick fog and smoke. Even massive bombing runs, so intense they turned paths of Laos into lunar landscapes, failed to stop the flow of supplies. The Ho Chi Minh Trail had become the ghostly highway of Southeast Asia. For the men and women who lived and worked along the trail, it was a life of constant hardship and danger. The trail workers, often teenagers, battled disease, exhaustion, and bombardment. Rain turned roads into rivers of mud. Bomb craters became impromptu graves. In the humid dark, they hauled munition, food, and fuel on their backs, on bicycles, and later in Soviet and Chinese trucks. But there was also fierce camaraderie, the sense that they were part of something greater. The trail wasn't just a supply line, it was a symbol of resistance, proof that the North Vietnamese could outlast the most technologically advanced military in the world. There was another war happening, however, one that the world wasn't supposed to know about. Because the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran largely through Laos, a country officially neutral under the Geneva Accords, the US bombing campaign there was conducted in secret. This became known as the Secret War, waged by the CIA, US Special Forces, and local allies who fought guerrilla battles against North Vietnamese troops operating along the trail. Its main purpose? Find and destroy the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But secrecy couldn't hide the scale of devastation. By the early 1970s, much of eastern Laos was reduced to rubble, and millions of unexploded bombs remained, many of which still maim civilians today. And yet, even under that reign of destruction, the Ho Chi Minh Trail just kept breathing. By the early 1970s, the Ho Chi Minh Trail had evolved into a full-blown highway system, as I mentioned. It was one of the greatest engineering feats of modern guerrilla warfare. When the US began withdrawing troops from Vietnam, the North Vietnamese ramped up their use of the trail to prepare for the final offensive. In 1975, as tanks rolled south toward Saigon, the supplies that had fed them had all come down that jungle road. On April 30th, 1975, Saigon fell. The Vietnam War was over. The United States had left. And the trail that the Americans had spent a decade trying to destroy had helped win that war. When peacetime came, the jungle began reclaiming what the war had built. Many sections of the trail were abandoned, overgrown by bamboo and vines. Others became modern highways, linking Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, turning the scars of war into roads of trade. But the legacy of the trail remains. It is a symbol of resilience, of a nation that, despite overwhelming odds, built victory one footpath at a time. The History Brief. The following comes from John and Claire Whitcomb's Oh Say, Can You See? Unexpected Anecdotes About American History. Charles Dawes, newly elected vice president under Calvin Coolidge, liked to take a nap in the afternoon, and normally his job didn't present much of an obstacle. His only constitutional duty, presiding over the Senate, could be left to someone else, but he had to be present if there was a tie so that he could cast the deciding vote. Dawes' services looked like they might be necessary when Coolidge's appointment of Charles B. Warren as Attorney General ran into trouble. But Republicans and Democrats were squabbling endlessly, and Dawes believed that the wrangling would go on for hours. So he left for his hotel room to take a nap. Suddenly, the issue was brought to a vote, and it was tied 40-40. The Republicans tried to stall while Dawes was rushed back to the Senate in a taxi. He sprinted down the halls to the Senate chamber, but he was too late. A vote had been switched, and the appointment rejected. Thank you again for tuning in and helping make this humble little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying the show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found on the website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. If you'd like to email me, you can do so at peter@historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.